So, Brendan, tell me, when you started, you thought, all right, I'm going to prove this guy wrong. What did you actually do?
Yeah. So the practical details of that were really, really straightforward. I have, as an aside, professionally, I work in IT. I'm a software developer, so I work a problem-solving, engineering sort of logical sort of mindset. And so I needed to be convinced that there was some science there. I needed to be convinced that, I could look up some sources, that there were doctors and professors and scientists out there who would actually endorse this and who were real people, not just, deep fakes or scammers or whatever, right? So I found a few names and latched on to a few names in the early stages of my journey. The first one was Professor Tim Noakes out of South Africa. Others were Dr. Stephen Finney, co-author of The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living. Then there's Grant Schofield and Karen Zinn here in New Zealand, public health professor and dietitian, respectively. They co-author a series of books, the What the Fat Book series. These were people whose work I was able to latch onto in the very early stages to see and understand that there were experts, using that word, out there that were actually quite accommodating of this dietary option. So that was the reassurance in my mind. And then I'm thinking, okay, right, how do I apply it in practice, sort of getting back to your question. So taking this logical problem-solving approach, I understood that low carb, by definition of the term, means at face value anything that is low in carbohydrates. So how do I understand what is low in carbs? I didn't really have any instinct for that at first. I mean, everybody knows what's low fat, right? Because chances are it just tells you on the front of the packet. It's not hard to sort of figure that out, right? It's like low fat, everything is just ubiquitous these days. But what is low carb? So I had to take a bit of time and effort to figure things out. And through trial and error, I learned that a lot of the time it came down to reading food labels and understanding the information not on the front of the packet, but the label on the back of the packet. So I'm turning things over and I'm looking at the amount of carbs in this food or drink per 100 grams of that product. And that's as opposed to carbs as a percentage of dietary recommendations, because I knew the dietary recommendations were no good for me. I've been trying my best to follow those for 30 years without success. And the amounts per serving weren't necessarily helpful to me either, because what's a serving, right? Well, the amount can vary from food to food, from product to product. But that number per 100 grams on the back of the label, I know this is the case in Australia and New Zealand, some other parts of the world, but not all of them. The US is a notable exception. It is a requirement to have the nutrient breakdown on the labels per 100 grams, as well as these other columns. And the neat thing about the 100 gram value is that gives you an objective comparison between any two products that you like. So when I got started with low carb, I'm understanding, right, okay, let's pick a number per 100 grams that is your carb number on the label there. Pick a number and buy everything you can find that is below that number and nothing that is above that number.
What number did you pick?
So the first number I picked was 10.
Okay.
So I decided I would not buy any more of anything that was over 10 grams of carbs per 100 grams.
Yeah.
I had been advised to start at 5, but I was afraid that I wouldn't find enough of a variety to get me going to begin with. So I set a number at 10, and I stuck to that. I still began with a house full of junk. Like I still had bread and rice and spaghetti and pizza and pies and pasta and all that sort of thing in the fridge and freezer.
Yeah.
And I didn't want any of that to go to waste. So I started actually by just running that stuff down. I didn't throw anything away, but I stopped buying any more of it as per this new rule, because these things are all, 30, 40, 50 grams of carbs per 100 grams of food. One of the highest things on my shelf at the time, I remember, was a jar of strawberry jam, which was something like 65 gram of carbs per 100 grams, practically all of which was sugar. Here's a jar of jam and it's literally 2/3 sugar. Okay, so that's an easy one to go, and fruit juices and so on aren't much better. So they were the first things to go, but I gradually ran everything down And I'm gradually replacing them with all of these things that are sufficiently low in these carbs per 100 grams. And that was where they came with a label. There are a number of things, particularly in your meat and veg aisles, those areas of the supermarket that obviously don't have any labels at all. So you've got to do a bit of a Google to figure out, okay, what would the theoretical nutrition label for this vegetable or this cut of meat be like, etc. And I found myself coming home from the supermarket with all of these things that I never really had much of before in the past, to any great degree. And a lot of it as well was real, whole, unprocessed food. So like I say, it's predominantly meat, it's predominantly veggies, your non-starchy varieties, the above ground veggies. I'm coming home with eggs, and eggs itself were a bit of a challenge for me because historically I did not enjoy them, but right. I decided I would find a way to enjoy them. It's like, right, let's gather everything I can find that is sufficiently low in carbs, and now that I have it all at home, I don't want to throw it out. I have to find some way of making this work. I have to start learning to cook. Because that was something that I'd never really done either when I was growing up, was learning to cook. And you might sort of think, well, how does a grown man not know how to at least, navigate the kitchen to just a really rudimentary degree? And the answer to that question sort of goes back to the advice that I've been told when growing up. It was all about food quantity. There was no recognition or regard of food quality. It didn't matter what you ate, you just had to eat less of it. Yeah. And so with that idea in mind, I was sort of thinking, what is the point in spending the time in the kitchen learning how to prepare something that isn't going to be any better for me than, just grab whatever out of the freezer, chuck it in the microwave for a few minutes, wolf it down, get on with my life. Yeah. It was because there was just no awareness or recognition or regard anywhere for this concept of food quality, just the real food, the whole unprocessed food, the things that were either recently alive or that came from things that were recently alive. So again, your meat, your veg, your eggs, nuts to an extent, dairy to an extent, they're all real foods that come from the farm as opposed to the factory. So there was, I set myself that challenge. I start to come home with all of these fancy foods. They were fancy in my mind, but it was really straightforward stuff. And I'm having to literally start from scratch. Okay, well, how might I cook this mince? How might I cook this steak? How might I prepare these eggs that isn't going to make me barf afterwards? Because I was really not an egg fan. My solution to that, by the way, was just to drown them in cheese until they tasted like cheese and not like egg.
Oh, good. I can cross that question off because I literally think I've got to ask you, have you cooked your eggs?
Yeah, the solution to that was the solution was to add other things to it. Mm-hmm. And it's not quite to that extreme now. I will have them on their own, or I'll have them with something else like some sausage or whatever on the side as well. So I have conquered my issue with egg subsequently. And I really pushed myself on that one because I could tell everywhere I went looking for numbers on eggs, by those numbers, it's just this fantastic little packet of protein and healthy fat. By the numbers, there's hardly anything better for us.
Amazing.